Amanda Marcotte is a feminist journalist, author, and blogger who has been described by critics as funny, really funny, with a wit as sharp as a survival knife. She writes regularly for Slate's Double X Factor, Raw Stories Pandagon, and RH Reality Check, where she also podcasts. She has 2 books out on Seal Press about surviving and thriving as a feminist and as a progressive. Please welcome Amanda Marcotte.
Okay, so I want to talk about how the secular movement and the feminist movement are aligned, and if we have a secular movement that doesn't put feminism at the top of its hierarchy, I think we're going to be an ineffective and irrelevant movement. So I want to kind of talk about what feminism and secularism have in common first. So secularists, of course, love challenging popular beliefs. A lot of us consider ourselves skeptics as well, but we challenge religion, superstition, pseudoscience, supernatural claims, unconstitutional attacks on secularism, magical thinking. This is a ghost dog. We're against that. And, you know, sexism is one of those long-standing popular beliefs that we really should, just like ghost dogs and religion, we should be challenging. I mean, it's thousands of years and entire societies built on this premise that women are an inferior class put here to serve men's needs. And in fact, not only that, but it's something that almost every major religion around the world teaches pretty explicitly, even if they deny it. And in this country, the people that we as secularists kind of consider the enemy, the opposition, the sort of people that want to write religion into law, like they have a lot of things that they care about. They care about, you know, putting prayer in schools and teaching creationism and other things like that. But their most number one priority is oppressing people on the basis of gender and sexuality. So they go after gay rights, they go after women's rights. They just really want to protect straight male privilege. I would say when it comes to the religious right, like 10% is putting 10 commandments up and putting school prayer and creationism, and then 90% of it is women and gays, you know? And, you know, I think that it's also important to think of feminism in this sort of very broad way. This was a longer talk, I kind of crunched down a little bit. This panel here is basically about like how the United Nations has sort of embraced feminism and realized what I think the secular movement would do well to recognize too, which is that if we want the world, if we want people, if we want society to be better, we have to make feminism sort of a central thing. So this is the Millennium Development Goals that the UN set out, and they usually just have these sort of kinds of goals for just human development, and then they realized that if they didn't also have women's development, that all other kinds of human development were going to fail. So, and these are a few examples of the way that feminism has become central to the way that like social activists sort of view the entire progress of humanity. So feminism is central to the environmentalist movement, for instance. I recommend looking up this article called Beyond 7 Billion by Kenneth Weiss and Rick Loomis of the LA Times to sort of get an idea of what we're talking about here. They are talking about overpopulation. We have 7 billion people on this planet. And when they started to do this project, not really thinking about what the best sort of way to talk about overpopulation and what its impact on the environment was, but when they started to interview people and experts, they realized the number one most important thing to slowing the population growth and slowing down global warming and slowing down all these other problems is letting women control how many children they have. Just that simple thing can do wonders to help save our environment. And this woman right here that they were photographing told the reporters that she had only wanted 2 children, but because of the Catholic Church in the Philippines, they took away all the family planning clinics, all the government subsidized family planning clinics. So she had no contraception, and she now has 8 children, even though she only wanted 2. So that's the sort of so who's to blame? In this case, it's religion. You know, religion is the enemy of those of us who want to save the planet, because, or at least the Catholic Church particularly, because they don't care how many people are made as long as they keep women reproducing. against their will. That's the critical thing. Feminism is central to the fight against poverty. According to the UN, women make up 70% of the world's poor. And a lot of this is that women want to do things like work, get education, and be men's economic equals. But they are stopped at every turn. By who? Religious theocrats. This is Malala Yousafzai. I always mangle that. I am so sorry. She got famous because she survived an assassination attempt at Taliban hands, and the reason that she was targeted, even though she's just a young girl, is because she fights for girls' right to education in Pakistan. This is exactly the sort of thing we're talking about. Women do want to do better, but it's religion that gets in their way. And then the third thing that is sort of a critical for human development is better health care. You know, and women's health care specifically is a major part of this. Maternal mortality, infant mortality, AIDS, these are all kind of preventable deaths simply by increasing women's rights, by giving women more control over their sexuality, over their reproduction. So who's in the way of that? The fundamentalist movement in the U.S. is a big one. For instance, when George Bush was in office, he basically, at the behest not just of the Catholics, but of Protestant fundamentalists, basically ended all foreign family planning funding. So I think a lot of people think the Catholics are the ones that are against contraception and abortion and all that, but we also have a Protestant movement in this very powerful country that is also against those things. So I want to say secularists and skeptics without feminism can do a lot of good in this world. We can fight creationists, we can fight 10 Commandments and Lord's Prayer, psychics, anti-vaccinationists, all that stuff. But if we add feminism, we can fight climate change and sexual repression and illness and death and poverty and sexual and domestic violence. And paranoia about fake geek girls. It's not as important, but I think we should fight that too. Feminism and religion are kind of natural enemies. I know there are a lot of feminist theocrats or theologians who disagree. But in my opinion, when you look at so much of women's suffering and pain in this world and things that make your whole brain cry, it's often religion, fundamentalist religion here and abroad. And it's definitely women who stand to benefit the most from secularism. So, I was originally going to talk about Plan B and how the secularists, pro-science fight won the feminist fight for us, because I wanted to end on an optimistic note, but I woke up with my leg hurting, in case y'all didn't notice, so I changed strategy to something more pessimistic. I want to talk about what's going on in Texas. This is a protest at the Capitol grounds. 5,000 people came out, so they're fighting in this bill in Texas. Unfortunately, it passed. Second special session, it's SB 1. It is a massive, massive anti-abortion bill. In the state of Texas, they've already defunded... In the state of Texas, they've already done a lot of defunding of contraception, both slashing direct subsidies of contraception and also rejecting Medicaid funding for contraception. $30 million of Medicaid funding has been cut for contraception in that state. So already their birth rate, unwanted birth rate, is going up. Now they bring out this bill, which again just passed and will be signed by Governor Perry soon. It's going to end 37 out of 42 abortion clinics in the state. And there will be no abortion clinics in the western part of Texas, which is literally like 400 miles. If you live in El Paso and you wanted an abortion in Texas after that, you would have to drive 8 hours. So what's in the bill? It requires clinics to meet ambulatory surgical center standards. It requires providers to have hospital admitting privileges, and it bans abortions after 20 weeks. All this seems, I think, a little bit reasonable. I do feel for this man. I'm sorry that he regrets the abortion he didn't have. He seems pretty angry about it. None of the stuff in this bill is reasonable. They're passing it off as if it's like as if it's a women's health care bill. But clinics don't actually need hospital admitting privileges. Abortion is so incredibly safe that most abortion clinics will almost never send a patient to the hospital. And to keep hospital admitting privileges, you have to often send at least 5 patients to the hospital a year. Your average abortion clinic couldn't meet that standard. Ambulatory surgical center standards are not necessary. This is basically for things like getting knee surgery or plastic surgery. But an abortion is like a 1-minute procedure if you get a procedure. And a lot of these places only just give you the pill. And they want you to be able to do basically a full theater surgery with gurney access and all sorts of things. And the 20-week abortion ban, almost no abortions are after 20 weeks. A good chunk of the ones that are fetal defects, women who have high blood pressure, things like that, and need it for medical reasons. So this isn't about health or life. So what is it about? It is about theocracy. It is about writing the religious rights beliefs into law. And the religious right controls the Texas Republican Party through the primary system. This is something that Rick Perry, the governor of Texas, and David Dewhurst, the lieutenant governor of Texas, have both found out firsthand. Both of them went up in primaries, and both of them saw that the person who was able to cater to the religious right was the one who won. Rick Perry beat Kay Bailey Hutchinson in a primary runoff for governor. He thumped the Bible harder. He won. David Dewhurst went up against Ted Cruz in a primary for the Senate. He did not thump the Bible as hard as Ted Cruz. He lost. That's how the religious right controls politics in this country. They control the party on the primary level, and then the party gets into power, and then they control everything. Our side, Wendy Davis, the Khaleesi of Texas. Wendy Davis, speaking for the side of the facts. The facts are fetuses do not feel pain. The 20-week ban is based on this notion that fetuses feel pain at 20 weeks. There's no scientific evidence for this, none. Scientific evidence, the earliest they put it is 28 weeks, and that's the very earliest. It's probably later. It's the notion that they are doing this for women's health is ridiculous. Childbirth is 14 times more deadly than abortion in the U.S. Abortion is incredibly safe. It's like as safe as getting a tooth drilled, probably safer. And already we're seeing a black market for abortion growing up in Texas. Just go on the internet and Google the words flea market abortion. People are going to Mexico and buying ulcer medications from pharmacies and from flea markets that sell for $40 a pill and taking them because sometimes it terminates a pregnancy, but sometimes it terminates it only a little, and then they have to go to an emergency room and just pray that the doctor, knows what they're doing, which they usually do. So I wouldn't be too afraid, but we have the facts. They have basically a religious opposition to sexual liberty. At the end of this day, that's what this is about. Sexual liberty for women and the religious rights objection to it. And anyone who thinks it's about life or some sort of religious belief in life, if that was true, then why are they defunding contraception and trying to eliminate sex education at the same time? And what's really amazing about our opposition, the religious right, is because they start from this premise that's BS, which is like, we have this imaginary God and we're going to enforce it on the rest of you through law, through these kind of backdoor channels. They feel no compunction about just making shit up as they go along. And I just have a few examples just from this debate. So this is Representative Jody Laubenberg. She's the woman who wrote the omnibus bill. And when they were debating it, the Democrats basically tried to amend the bill so that there was an exception for rape victims in the post-20-week abortion ban. And she said, no, you don't need that, because in the emergency room we have what's called rape kits where they get a woman cleaned out. Which made me wonder if she thinks that after they pass this bill you can get an abortion as long as you call it getting cleaned out. Rape kits do not clean anybody out. Rape kits are there to collect evidence to prosecute the rape. There's no cleaning out of anything. And if they do pregnancy prevention, it's by giving you a Plan B birth control pill, something that the Theocrats have tried to fight every step of the way. This is another wonderful Theocrat in the Texas legislature, Bill Zedler. This is what he said after Wendy Davis had a filibuster that basically blocked the bill the first special session that they had it. He called her a terrorist because she ran a filibuster. We're not talking about sane people here. Oh yes, and who heard about this? They were confiscating tampons during the Senate debate yesterday. I am not kidding. So basically the Texas legislature has been filling up every day with pro-choicers protesting, making their presence known. And the Republicans, the religious right is very, very angry about this. So they created this claim, this story that women were going to be throwing tampons and pads on the floor of the Senate from the balconies, and they used that as a pretext to stop every woman trying to come into the legislature and confiscating their tampons and pads off them, humiliating them sexually just for being women who think that they get to show up and be the kind of people who menstruate and think that they should have a say in their own health care access.
But you could still bring your concealed handgun in.
Yes. You could still bring your concealed handgun in. You just couldn't bring your tampons in. The Texas Freedom Network, if you guys don't know this organization, please learn about them. They're awesome. They're a secular group in Texas that fights the religious right there. They responded to all this by offering a petition to demand that a sex education bill be added to the special session that would require schools in Texas to teach comprehensive sex education, including contraceptive care. Their reasoning for this was, if you hate abortion so much, why not teach people how to not get pregnant in the first place? And, as you can see from the map, there's a pretty strong correlation between not having good sex education and having a high teenage pregnancy rate. Another wonderful theocrat responded to this petition, and a Democrat who brought it up in debate by saying, I just have to read this out loud. My wife worked at a home for unwed moms, and one of the little kids that was born, his name is David. David came about as a result of his mom and dad, who were just 16 at the time, going to a Planned Parenthood deal, by which he means a sex education seminar, where they taught them how to use contraceptives. They were not sexually active at that point. They got into the car, and they were so hot and bothered from this deal that he couldn't even get the condom on. His argument was, if you can believe it, that sex education causes unintended pregnancy because it is so sexually arousing. To kids who have smartphones, they all have smartphones that they can just pull porn up on, but nothing like your gym teacher telling you what the failure rate of the birth control pill is. I'm getting kind of horny thinking about it. And anyway, we have the scientific evidence. We know there's a strong correlation between high teenage pregnancy and low sex education. Anyway, feminism and secularism, our interests totally align. We have the same enemies. It's the religious right. Those are our enemies. We both embrace a humanistic philosophy that is centered around people and making people's lives better. And we both, and I think this is something that I think a lot of secularists and feminists don't see in each other, and we need to see more. We both just disregard arguments from tradition. We both see them as the emptiness as they are. Secularists understand that just because people have believed in God for thousands of years doesn't make it true. And feminists understand that just because we've had patriarchy for thousands of years doesn't make it right. So I want to kind of leave you with that. Just go out there, fight the good fight, and make feminism a central part of your secularist values. Wow. I ripped through that really quick, so I guess about 5 minutes for questions? Yeah, 4 minutes. Does anyone have questions?
What about when our SS
Patriarchy, yes. And as soon as you say that to them, they go, "There's no such thing as patriarchy, right?" I think that we have to sort of deal with that as it comes. But I think, a very good thing to focus on when you're arguing with them is my 90-10 argument. Like, what is the religious right? What are the theocrats doing that we should be fighting? Do we want to fight the 100%, or do we only want to fight the 10% of what they're up to? So, and it's very difficult for them to deny that the religious right is obsessed with women's bodies and gay people.
It seems like most of the opposition that I've run into about modern feminism is not about any of this. It's that a lot of people seem to have this idea that feminism has become some horrible, radical, anti-male thing. They seem to be like, oh, look at this one feminist group that's trying to take away men's rights or something. Do you find that's most of the opposition to feminism, and how do you deal with it?
Yeah, well, and I call that a bad faith argument, I think a lot of the time that is people who do oppose feminism because they really don't agree with all of this. But they know that that's socially unacceptable in progressive, secularist, liberal circles, and so instead they attack strawmen. Particularly, I would point out, for instance, like those men's rights guys are always circulating as evidence for feminism's like evilness, these long lists of evil men hating quotes from feminists. I recommend, if you ever come across one of those lists, going to Man Boobs, amazing website that sort of fights against that, and he has got some primers on those quotes because most of them are made up, or they come from fictional characters in books. I'm not kidding. Or they're taken completely out of context. So when people are doing stuff like that, they can't even really be considered proper skeptics because they're not using evidence-based reasoning. More questions?
Are you familiar with a website named Jezebel, and what is your opinion on it?
Yes, yeah. Actually, one of my very good friends, she founded that website. So yes, I know them. I like them. They're pretty good. I mean, they're mainstream. Their whole point is to be a mainstream website that does women's stuff, and it's not necessarily feminist stuff. It wasn't founded to be a feminist website. So I think it's an interesting leap forward in mainstream media that a women's website, the kind of place that used to just be makeup and hair tips and like how to please your man kind of writing, now has as a good half of its coverage is feminist issues. And they're doing well with that. I mean, that shows a lot about the demand that's out there for that kind of content.
Give us some ideas of stuff we should be reading, please.
Oh, God. Me?
Where can we find you?
I write for Slate. Actually, if you really want to follow this reproductive rights battle, RH Reality Check is probably one of the best websites that you could go to. They are solely for this, and I do podcasts for them. I think there's so much out there online now. There's the mainstream websites like Jezebel and XX Factor and, Women in the World from Daily Beast. Those are all really good places to sort of get your news. And then there's a lot of like smaller underground feminist blogs, just too many I could even go into right now. Feministing, these are good blogs that are good places to start. You can usually find other blogs going there. So.
As an atheist, I love arguing with theists, and in some cases, I'm often arguing against them because they're in favor of feminism. But sometimes, whoa, sorry.
Against it.
I'm mixed. It's okay. Have a do-over, please.
Yes, do-over.
I'm often arguing against them. I'm in favor of feminism. But sometimes I've been told that I should sort of back off and let women make their own cases more or something.
This is a really common problem I think male allies, I like to call them, come up against. I completely and totally reject that argument. Like, you shouldn't stomp over women defending themselves, but if you're given a chance to defend feminism, by all means, do it. You don't need to like check your gender to do that. I know so many men that are just awesome feminists and are willing to fight. Particularly, it's important, I think, for men to talk to other men about feminism and about women's rights, because unfortunately, male voices have a little bit more power in our society, but instead of using that against us, we should use it for us. So I think I am done with this. So thank you very much.